Welcome everyone, thanks for joining. Today I wanted to talk about something that affects countless individuals, and that is trauma recovery. The question that I receive quite often is, how long does the trauma recovery process take? And I'm here today to explore that very question and also shed some light on a often very misunderstood journey. So why am I talking about trauma recovery? Well, my story with trauma started 8 years ago when my husband and I were in a struggling marriage, and it was only after I decided that I'd had enough that my husband was finally able to reveal a terrible history of childhood abuse at the hands of the church. He had never told anyone about what had happened to him until that point. Now, at first, when I heard this news, I was, of course, devastated. I couldn't believe that there were these bad people out there that could do these things to children. And I felt great sadness for my husband and what he had been through. But I also felt a little bit of hope that maybe this was that unforeseen issue that I just couldn't put my finger on, and that if we spent some time and did counseling and really talked about what had happened to him, that in a year or two we could be at a better place and we could create better patterns in our marriage. But what I learned very quickly is that was very naive of me. I did not understand what the trauma process entailed, and I want to talk about that because I do feel like the literature shows us that the more that couples know what is coming for them with the trauma recovery process, the more likely the relationship is to survive. So before I take you through what are commonly the stages that you will see in the trauma recovery process, I want to tell you a quick little story. And it is a story about my daughter, who was about 2.5, 3 years old, and she was a binky baby. And we loved that she was a binky baby because that was something that we were able to give her immediately, and she used that tool to self-soothe. However, you do get to a point in the childhood process where the binky has made its course, and it is time for the binky to go away. And we went to our dentist, and our dentist told us that it was time that we needed to have her start using something other than the binky. So I came up with this great idea that I had seen somewhere online about tying the binkies to helium balloons and putting all the binkies, tying them to that balloon, and then releasing them into the sky for these binkies to help other babies who also needed tools to self-soothe. So we proposed this to my 2.5, 3-year-old daughter, and of course she was not interested. However, us being the good parents that we were, we continued to insist that this was the course that we needed to take. So we picked a Sunday, and I went out and got the balloons, and my husband and I took our daughter out there, and we made a big deal about tying the binky onto the balloons, and that this was really going to help other kids, that she was old enough, she didn't need them anymore, but that the other babies out there could really use her help, and thanking her for giving away those binkies. So of course we gave the balloons with the binkies tied on it to my daughter and told her to release it. We were all excited, and she would not. So my husband grabbed the binkies and released them into the sky. And we actually have photos of this process where our daughter at first was watching the balloons go up into the sky with some sort of excitement. And it was only when the balloons were so far away in the sky that you could barely see them that she realized what had just happened. And she was hysterical, crying, wanting the binkies back. So we took her inside, we tried to distract her, and what we didn't quite realize is how much time it was going to take for her to be able to go to sleep again, to be able to self-soothe herself without the binkies. So this led us to a phase where we had to learn new patterns. We had to learn new ways of self-soothing, new ways of taking naps by using blankets or stuffies or music to get her to go to sleep. So it took a while. We were all exhausted, but eventually we did get to the point where Brinley was able to go to sleep by herself, and she was no longer asking for a binky every single moment of every single day. So I'm hoping that you can use this analogy when I describe the different phases of the trauma recovery process. So the first stage of the recovery process that is most often talked about, there's usually about 3 of these phases, and the first one is the crisis phase. And you can use my previous story to understand the crisis phase being that point when you realize what has happened to you, when you finally take a deep dive and all of those feelings that you have had pent up and all of those memories that you have suppressed come to the surface and you can no longer ignore them. That is the crisis phase. And I want to let you know that the crisis phase for someone who is supporting someone through the trauma recovery process is extremely painful and sad and emotional. And even though I thought that things would start to get better when my husband revealed that story, what I actually found is during the crisis phase, things got worse, way worse before they got better. But the good news is that the crisis period is temporary, that if they start to really acknowledge and feel the anger, feel the pain, feel the shame that they've felt their whole lives and suppressed, and start to deal with those emotions and acknowledge them, the crisis phase is temporary. And this will soon lead to the maintenance phase. And looking at my previous story with the binky, this is that phase where they're starting to create new patterns with the emotions that they are experiencing. So the experiences and the feelings will come up, but they'll create better ways of coping with them than they have in the past. So that is the maintenance phase. And the maintenance phase, we just don't know how long that is going to take. Each individual is different. But eventually that will lead to the stage of recovery. And this is when they will start to have more confidence in their ability to cope. And they will be able to have expressed all those anger, and the anger feelings will come up, but they will be able to deal with them. And this is the recovery phase. But I do want to let you know that there is no end point here. The trauma will always be with that person, and those trauma triggers will continue to occur. It's just that after the recovery process has occurred, they will be able to deal with those triggers in healthier ways, even though they still will occur. The other thing I want to let you know is that the trauma recovery process is full of ups and downs. And no matter how high and how low the ride may be, I want you to understand that the trajectory is ultimately upward. So while you will see significant ups and downs, and just when you think you're making progress, you'll feel like you're all the way back at the beginning. When you look at the total process throughout the phases, the ultimate trajectory is an upward path. I hope this was helpful for you to understand just exactly what the trauma recovery process looks like for most. Obviously, everybody's situation is different, but these are the common stages that the literature it shows, and this is what I experienced in my relationship with supporting my husband through the trauma recovery process. And I want you to know, if you are a spouse or a partner, of someone going through this process, it is not easy. And it is really true that the more that you know what to expect, the better you can prepare yourself for what is to come. And if this is you and you're looking for more information on what I've learned throughout the years of constant research and trial and error, I want you to subscribe to this YouTube channel, and I want you to check out my website, which is in the description, because I have tools and I am developing a community of wives who are struggling while supporting their husband through trauma recovery. We really don't need to suffer in silence and suffer alone through this. We can help each other.